Hi, how you doing and welcome back to the video on the channel. What we have for you today is our very first wildcard team video of the season. And we will just preface this by saying if you do want a wildcard this early in the season, it is absolutely fine. We're actually recording this during the Crystal Palace Brentford game, and maybe your weekend's not going to plan in FPL. Maybe you made some really obvious wrong calls and you just don't want to deal with them in the next few game weeks. You want them out of your team now. By all means, you should wildcard, but what I will say is do it from a place of thought rather than a place of panic. Players who have scored quite well in game week one might not always score well consistently. I think a good example would be someone like Semenyo for Bournemouth, who Bournemouth have just signed a new striker. So is he going to score regularly in the game weeks? Is he going to get those same opportunities that he has done in game week one? You need to take that into consideration. Don't chase the points. Those points have already gone. It doesn't mean there can't be further points down the line in future game weeks, but I think you have to keep a perspective. And the other side of that is someone like Smith Rowe or Watkins. You got them in your team in game week one because you thought they were good options. Just because they've not scored in the first game week doesn't suddenly make them bad options. For someone like Smith Rowe, how many points were you really expecting him to score away at Man United, a 5.5 million midfielder? I think if he can score one out of every 3 games he gets an attacking return, I think that's pretty good for a 5.5 million midfielder. So I wouldn't necessarily jump ship right now, because if you get rid of those players, they could score next game week and then you're wanting them back. So try and have a planned approach rather than a panicky approach. But a wildcard isn't always the worst thing to do. So our team right now, it's going to start with 2 Crystal Palace goalkeepers. Now, the upside of having 2 keepers from the same team is that if one of them doesn't play, the other one's quite likely to play. And you're not necessarily having to worry about a keeper that's not going to play in your team, especially if one gets injured. You're not wasting a transfer on a goalkeeper. The downside of that is it takes up 2 spots from the same team. You can only have 3 Crystal Palace players. So it really depends on how badly you want outfield Crystal Palace players. If you think you can get away with just having one outfield player from Palace for the full season, then that's absolutely fine. But if you think you might eventually want another Crystal Palace player and have 2 attackers, maybe Eze and Mateta, or maybe another defender, you double up on the defence, then you maybe want a different 4 million goalkeeper. Into the defence we go, and we've actually got 2 premiums here, and we've kind of offsetted that by getting 3 4.5 million defenders in. But the 3 cheaper defenders that we have in our team are looking like they're going to be quite regular players. Mazraoui did well for Man United at the weekend and actually got some bonus points as well, even though he didn't get an attacking return. Same with Trent, like both defenders. We talked about bonus points being more difficult for defenders, but both those players have had bonus points with no attacking returns in their first game weeks. Gvardiol is a good option as well. We've yet to have the Chelsea-Man City game, so he might have kept a clean sheet. But regardless of that, unless he's injured, Man City's fixtures now look pretty good. You could swap him for someone like a Gabriel or a Saliba, but Arsenal have tough fixtures in the next 4 game weeks, and I would err on the side of a Man City defender right now. But it is a nice option to have, knowing that you could just switch him for an Arsenal defender in the future. Someone like Livramento and Robinson, I think, are good options. Now, Livramento, it kind of depends on whether Newcastle sign another defender, if that will reduce his minutes. But to be honest, even if that does reduce his minutes and he's not as good an option as he might have been, you've still got 4 playing defenders and you've only got a 4.5 million defender on your bench in Livramento. It's not like it's destroying your whole team's value by having him there. So I think it's a risk worth taking, to be honest. Now into the midfield, and we are lacking in premium players in the midfield. But really, if you've got someone like Trent who can get you clean sheets and potential attacking returns, and the same with Gvardiol, then a 7 million and a 6 million defender is probably just as good as the same price in midfield, just because they've got different ways of scoring you points. We do still have a premium midfielder in Saka. I think it's important to still have an Arsenal player in your team, because once those fixtures changed, you're probably going to want to jump on more Arsenal players, and it will just save you a transfer in the mid to long term if you've got someone already there. And it's not just like he's going to be riding your bench. He can be someone who is really capable of good fixtures and performing in the tougher ones as well. Now, we've also gone with Diogo Jota. Now, the reason we've got Trent and Jota in the team is because we've got no Salah, and I do think that combination kind of nullifies the risk of not having Salah in there. I think Jota looks like he will be starting for the foreseeable future. Even if he comes off early, he's likely to get 60 plus minutes in every game. And I think as long as Liverpool keep playing well, there's not really a reason to change it. And the same with Trent. I don't really see him as being a rotation risk at this stage in the season. Maybe later down the line you might have an argument for that. But they're both fairly consistent when they're fit, and they both give you returns on, both sides of the pitch. Jota will still get a clean sheet point for every clean sheet he gets, and he's actually a registered midfielder playing as a striker, a bit like Havertz last season. Those players are really valuable because for every goal they get 1 or 2 more points, and they're more likely to get bonus points as well because it's coming from the midfield. So I do think Jota is a good pick, and keep playing him until he looks like he's actually being rotated a bit. Sometimes in FPL we think, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? But what if it doesn't happen? And what if Jota does keep starting up front and keeps getting regular minutes? I would think as soon as he loses his place, then you'll make the decision. But there's no point trying to make a decision on something that's not happened yet. Rounding out the midfield, we've got Eze and Nkunku. And like we say, we've not seen the Chelsea-Man City game as of this stage, but I do think Nkunku is a good value player moving forward. Chelsea do have excellent fixtures, and they include Wolves, Palace, Bournemouth, West Ham, Brighton and Forest in the next 6. They're all really good fixtures, and you would think that Nkunku will be getting minutes for Chelsea. How Chelsea do in those games remains to be seen and could be a matter of opinion. But I think as a 6.5 million midfielder, again, someone who's going to be playing further up the pitch, I think he represents good value. And kind of the same with Eze as well. We have got triple Crystal Palace in here, but it's really more like a double Crystal Palace. And Eze was a good option to get in because my team here is exactly 100 million. If you're looking for a 7 million midfielder, yeah, you might want an extra 0.5 million for someone like Gordon, and I think you'd have to sacrifice someone like a Livramento for a 4 million defender if that's the case. And if that is what you want, that's great. But I do think Eze does have high upside. Whether Elise leaving means Eze has more of a focal point, or whether Elise leaving means that other defences can focus more on Eze and they don't really have Elise to worry about, kind of remains to be seen, but he's still a good option as of this point. Up front, we've gone for Isak, Wood and Haaland. Now, for me, I think all three do have good fixtures moving forward. I think all three are focal points of the team. Wood is a little bit like Diogo Jota in the sense that he could lose his place, but until he actually loses his place, he's playing up front and he is on good form. He finished last season on good form. He started this season on good form, got a goal at the weekend and some bonus points to go with it. I think if you're wildcarding, you probably are going to want Haaland in. I think if you're wildcarding into game week 2 and you look at Haaland at home to Ipswich, you would be putting him in your team. So we've also added him in. In the long run, it's whether you want Haaland in that team or whether you want to bump up your Chris Wood and your Diogo Jotas to more sort of certain players who are going to play more regularly, or whether you want to upgrade a defender, to have an Arsenal defender in there alongside Trent and Gvardiol. That's kind of up to you. But I think if you're wildcarding right now, you do definitely need Haaland in your team. And I would say the same for Isak. They've got nice fixtures. So the team rating on Fantasy Football Hub, shout out to them, was 93%, which is pretty good. If you can get the low to mid 90s, there are so many variables in football that, yeah, the data is great and it's important to take it into account, but they can't count for everything. So I think if you can get low to mid 90s, that's good enough for me. And the team value is 100 million. Now, the strengths for me are it covers Salah. If you're a bit worried about not having Salah's points in your team, I think there is enough Liverpool in there to offset that. And it does give a solid bench as well. These defenders, they rotate quite nicely, and there's no one really in the starting 11 there on the screen that I wouldn't hesitate starting in the next, 4, 5, 6 game weeks, whilst you can also plan transfers as well. The weaknesses is maybe there's too few Arsenal players. Like we said, you could swap Gvardiol to Saliba, and it might be too knee-jerk as well. There are some players in here who've done well in game week 1, and it's like we said at the start, it's such a small sample size, you don't really know whether they're going to continue to do well in the future. So let me know what you think. Is it a bit risky? Are you wildcarding in game week 1, and what's your reasons why? What's your current team? If you put something in the comments and ask some questions, we will get back to you. Thank you very much for listening. Hopefully the first game week has gone well. We are going to be putting out how our team did as well as a game week 2 preview in a few days. So please do subscribe, like the videos if you want to keep in touch with all of that. And I will see you in the next one.